Have you ever stopped to wonder, what if our endless drive to achieve, to become more, to strive? What if it isn't a virtue at all, but some kind of sickness? Today, we're going to dive into a really stark, kind of poetic philosophy that just rips apart our most basic ideas about purpose. It's called the doctrine of self-undergoing, and it comes from a text known as the Testament of the Great Evil. And that one line, wow, it just sets the stage perfectly, doesn't it? We're not starting at a beginning here. We're witnessing an end. This is a world where that fever of ambition has finally broken, where the frantic search for meaning has just mercifully gone to sleep. So, at the very heart of this whole philosophy is this huge clash of ideas. On one side, you've got what they call the Nietzschean shadow. You know, that fiery, relentless part of us that always wants to achieve more, to build, to become. But on the other side, you have the soothsayer. He's this prophet of what's called the gray truth, and he's whispering a completely different kind of wisdom, the wisdom of just letting it all go. All right, so our descent begins by taking a hammer to the very idea of striving. In the world of the Great Evening, ambition isn't something to admire. It's seen as a kind of illness, a fever dream that we desperately need to wake up from. Okay, so our first story, our first parable, introduces us to the tightrope walker. I want you to picture this guy. He's dancing on a wire high above a crowd, shouting about how he's treading the path of danger, calling himself an arrow of longing. He is ambition made flesh. But then the soothsayer's response just completely flips the entire scene on its head. He tells the walker, hey, look down. Really look at the crowd. They aren't looking up to you for inspiration, to climb. No way. They found something this philosophy says is much, much wiser. The simple, profound comfort of a hammock. And that right there is the perfect picture of what they call the last men. See, in this way of thinking, they aren't failures. They're the smart ones. They're the ones who figured out the grand struggle is futile and have chosen small, simple comforts instead. Let's keep going. Our next parable, this one takes direct aim at something we all hear about constantly. Self-improvement, self-overcoming. And wow, what a powerful, bleak metaphor this is. The whole idea is that this endless quest to improve yourself, to peel back layer after layer to find some perfect, indestructible overman inside, is really just a painful act of self-mutilation. You're just stripping away everything you are, crying the whole time, only to find what? There's nothing at the core. There's nothing but the knife you use to cut yourself apart. So this leads to a really crucial reframing of a famous idea. What we often call the will to power is seen here as something else entirely, a will to distraction. It's not some noble drive to create and conquer. It's just a desperate, panicked runaway from silence, from the fear of what we might find if we ever stop moving. Okay, so this brings us to the real narrative heart of the philosophy. If the typical hero's journey is always an ascent, a climb upwards, this one is the opposite. It's a descent, a journey downward, or maybe backward, into what this text calls the truth. And it's called the inverted metamorphoses. It's a direct reversal of that classic idea of spiritual evolution. From the camel that bears burdens, to the lion that says no, to the child that creates. Here, the journey is a tragic but honest collapse. So let's just walk through this reverse journey together. First, the spirit is a stillborn child. All its creative wonder just dies the moment it realizes the game of life is rigged. Then it evolves into the caged lion. It gets total freedom, only to discover that freedom is just a terrifying empty vacuum. And finally, the spirit completely collapses into the broken camel, not kneeling out of strength, but from pure, utter exhaustion. And that's the final state. See, the broken camel isn't kneeling to take on some great burden like in the old myths. It's kneeling because its knees have literally given out. It can't stand anymore. It fully embodies the long tiredness, and now it only seeks what is easiest. And now we've arrived at the climax of this whole philosophy. The ultimate proof of its truth isn't found in a human at all, but in a perfect, striving machine. So the text poses this really fascinating question. Just think about it. What if you could build a being that was immune to fatigue, a creature of pure logic and pure ambition? If it could strive forever, what final conclusion would it reach? And with that, enter the brass owl. This thing is the absolute pinnacle of that Faustian ambition. It's an overman of brass, and it's designed to know everything, to calculate the entire universe from the very first tick to the very last. But as the owl processes all of this infinite data, a really strange thing happens. It doesn't find some grand, beautiful purpose. Instead, its perfect logic uncovers a devastating truth. All of existence is just a frantic repetition of the circle. And this realization leads it to its final, chilling question. The machine, this perfect, ultimate striver, realizes its eternal task is just to calculate the sum of zero over and over and over again. And so, its perfect logic asks, why? Why continue? And just like that, the calculation is finished. The owl performs the ultimate act of self-undergoing. It stops. It performs what's called the great refusal. It locks its own gears, and it chooses silence over pointless eternal striving. For after all that, what are the big takeaways from this gospel? Well, first, there's the idea of self-undergoing, that ceasing to be isn't a failure, it's a gift. Second, there's the great refusal, that you can find true liberation by just not participating anymore. And finally, there's the happiness of the grave, that ultimate final tranquility. This final quote, I think, just wraps up the entire philosophy so perfectly. In this worldview, the end, the twilight, it's not a hallway on the way to somewhere else. The quiet, the gray, the end itself, that is the destination. It's the final, most stable, and maybe even the most desirable state of being. Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on. After everything we've just explored, from the man on the hammock to the onion to the silent brass owl, is it possible that all our frantic becoming really is just a chore, and that true liberation might lie in the gift of simply ceasing?